certainty is really appealing because, we live in an uncertain world, and people naturally gravitate towards things that they feel very sure about, because they feel like that's a very comfortable position, and they think, well, the rest of the world is very uncomfortable and very uncertain, but I know this. And this is why it's really difficult to convince people who have certain not flawed beliefs, but people who believe something that might be proven untrue will cling to that belief. And I think that's a discipline that all of us need to impose on ourselves, is letting go of that and saying, I'm comfortable always being uncertain and always checking, and not just clinging to things that are comfortable, because that's the way that you succeed, and that's the way that the world moves forward, that businesses move forward, is not looking backward or being nostalgic for the way things were, or hanging on to something that used to be true, which is going on a lot of businesses right now, especially in publishing. It's like, oh, magazines used to be awesome and really profitable, so we're going to try to make magazines. It's like a horseless carriage now, is like the iPad magazine application. And letting go of that and having that discipline and being willing to be personally uncomfortable because things are constantly changing, and something that you loved that was very successful last year might not work anymore, but always looking, always reevaluating to say, is the thing I'm working on, is it going in the right direction? Does it reflect the way that the world really is instead of the way I wish the world worked? And that is really, really difficult, but I think that's where being successful in creating things that solve real problems for people, that's where it starts. And it's just cultivating that attitude in yourself, and always checking to make sure that all of your decisions are in line with that, and in line with actual real world context, and not based in a situation that you just wish were actually true. I think funding startups nobody needs kills innovation, because if this is the culture. If the culture is that funding a new company or starting a new business is the same as just putting chips down on a table, that means that that's where the energy and attention are going. And if you look now in the current climate, there are these companies come out, and it's like a horse race. People look at the new company launches, and they don't say like, oh, that's a really great idea. They're like, oh, who's going to win? And it's totally disconnected from what's going on in the real world. I think the other issue with that is the issue of sustainability, because an investor can invest in a company that's making something nobody needs, and that investor can make money. That investor can cash out because maybe what they've done is a founder has come up with an idea that's completely erroneous but very attractive. The founder has attracted a lot of talent because they say, oh, this sounds like a fun thing to work on. The investor invests in that idea, and then they package that up and sell it to an acquirer. And this is a very successful outcome for the investor. But all it is very expensive and complicated recruiting. And now some large, perhaps not very innovative company that can't attract talent has great talent in handcuffs to work on their stupid products. And that means that those people who might be very bright and very creative have been brought into service of things that aren't very, compelling or interesting or useful in the rest of the world. And everybody here is successful to a certain extent, right? The investor can make their money back and have a good return. Everybody who went to work for that company can make a good amount of money on whatever they got from the acquirer, and the acquirer has engineering talent. And whatever product they were working on in that startup might be taken out of operation. Plenty of products are sunsetted and shut down in an acquisition. But if you look at it from the investor's point of view, they're successful. If you look at it from the founder's point of view, they're successful. If you look at it from the wider world and do we have better products and services because of this system? No. It's just been, a wealth transfer, and some people went to work for a tiny company and ended up working at a very large company, and in 2 years, their handcuffs will be off and they will start the system over again. And that's where the incentives are. There's no incentive to make anything sustainable, because as long as the investor makes their return within their horizon, they're happy. They don't care if 10 years from now, we have flying cars that run on hydrogen and don't pollute. There's an attitude, I think, among, I won't tar, all entrepreneurs or all investors, but I think there is in this enthusiasm for just getting out there and prototyping and trying stuff, an idea that it's perfectly fine to just, let's just try something and let's just see if it works. And I think that cavalier attitude where you don't care, because that's what it sounds like to me. Like if you just want to try something and, we'll throw it at the wall, and if it sticks, if it works, it's fine, it's not. That means that you're not really interested in solving a problem. You're just sort of entertaining yourself, as opposed to being really genuinely invested in solving a real problem. Then you'll think, well, what's the best way I can use the resources I have at hand to solve this problem, versus, we'll just see if this works. And I think that attitude, that fail fast attitude, can really increase your chances of failure. Because the chance of failure that's decreased is the chance of personal failure. Like there's no stigma. Like you can say, I started this company, I made this really stupid Pinterest knockoff, and I got some investment, and it didn't work out. And the chances of being able to recover personally and continue on in your career are very high. But if you don't actually care, if you're not personally invested in whether you're solving a real problem and whether that solution works, that actually, I think, increases the chances that whatever you're doing won't work and will fail. And I think that's not good. I think that's a huge opportunity cost. You're just wasting everybody's time. You're wasting your potential users' time because they're like, this sounds kind of interesting, but the people who made it didn't really care. They were solving a real problem, so it's a waste of my time. You're wasting any developers or designers. You're wasting your investors' money. And it's like, why not start and ask the hard questions to make sure that you're making the best use of everybody's time and resources and energy, even if it's one person, even if it's a couple people doing this in their spare time. The first step of any research process is articulating the questions you want to answer. And sometimes that's the most important part. Like if you can talk about what you're trying to accomplish and just list out, well, here are the things we know we don't know. Here are the areas that we are making assumptions. That's when I talk about research just being at its core a critical thinking process. Even that sometimes, especially if you're doing something very new, that might be all the research you need. But those questions have to be really good because research is trying to find the answers to those questions. And if you're asking the wrong questions or asking questions that are too general or too specific or not actually applicable to what you're doing, then you won't really gather appropriate knowledge. So once you identify the questions, the next step is to say, well, what's the best way to answer those? If it's questions about your audience, the right thing to do might be to interview people who represent your target audience, or to go out and observe. If you're designing, say you're designing a new system for a restaurant, some sort of interactive menu, something like that, maybe you just go and observe how people behave in restaurants so that would inform that side of it. Or you might say, well, we don't know, we know what we want to do, and we know certain things about our audience, but we don't really know who the competition is. And the competition might be anything people are doing to solve the same problem. It might not be obvious competitors. And so you might talk to people and ask questions about, well, we're trying to help you with your financial planning. What do you do now? What aren't you doing? What are your concerns? And that would give you a better sense for what are all the things that your target user base or audience might be doing to solve the problem you want to solve for them. And then you can say, well, how do we position ourselves, or how do we design our service or product so that it's better, cheaper, easier, whatever your competitive attributes are, than the way people already think about doing it or are actually doing it. So when talking to representative users or representative target customers, it's really important to be very mindful of how you pose questions, because that will have a big influence on the answers you get. And you really want to understand, if you ask people about their attitudes or their preferences, they'll say things that may not represent their behavior. And so that's one of the trickiest things about customer interviews, is sometimes you have to ask things indirectly, and you should never ask people what they like, because people can talk about things they like or don't like, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they'll choose certain products or services or behave in a certain way. What you should ask people is ask them what they actually do and why they do it. Those sorts of questions about real life context and behavior will point you to the direction you need to go if you want your customers to do something differently. People are really, they're creatures of habit. And a lot of what the human brain does is, like, habits are shortcuts. And especially these days when there's so many choices and so much information, I think people really cling to their habits. And that's one of the biggest mistakes people make in creating new products and services, is thinking, oh, I can change somebody's habit. That is so hard, you might as well consider that impossible. The better question to ask is, what habits do they have right now? Why do they have them? And how can I fit what I'm doing into that path that they're already taking? It's the reason why, a coffee shop that's on the way to a bus stop will do very well, and the coffee shop right around the corner might be 10 steps away, but it will fail because it requires people to go off of their path instead of taking advantage of everybody lining up to catch the bus. I like being right. I think everybody really, that's a good feeling when you have the right answer. And that can be one of those things, as you advance in a profession or become more skilled or more mature, you identify the things about yourself that are, there's low road and high road, and there's low road is like, oh, I got the right answer. I think I try for myself, I've tried to move from the satisfaction of being right and rushing to be right or rushing to prove I'm right to asking a really good question. And this is a way that, if you're looking for validation in conversation or professional validation, switching that desire to have the right answer to the desire to ask a really penetrating or difficult question. And that's what I look for now in myself. If I'm in a conversation where we're defining requirements or talking about a project, that's the feedback I want is, oh, that's a really good question, because that's a challenge to everybody else to say, okay, have you thought about this? What's your answer to that? And identifying a question that doesn't have an easy answer is much more helpful than throwing out an answer, because any answer that you would come up with that's right now is going to be wrong tomorrow, because again, you're answering questions in a world, in a situation, in a competitive context that is changing constantly. And so it's really important to get past that need to be right and move towards always be looking for what you don't know the answer to. Because when you think about your goal shouldn't be, to have your ego, soothed or petted, because that doesn't create innovation. What creates innovation is always to be looking for that next challenge and to be identifying the questions that other people think they know the answer to, but nobody's really answered yet. Because answering those hard questions is what you should be doing with your design or with your business. And that's not going to be an easy, oh, I just thought of this and I'm totally right kind of answer. When I think about how to characterize the right questions, the ones that I recommend starting with are the ones you're most uncomfortable about asking. Because those are the things where you're most likely to be relying on assumptions or relying on wishful thinking. The right question, if it's something that you're a little bit uncomfortable about exploring, that's the place to start to say, okay, here's a place where I should really be asking questions about this. I should be verifying this belief I have. And that can be really tricky, especially when you're dealing with a group of people, perhaps in an organization that's based on a particular worldview. And it's very anti-authoritarian to ask these questions, to ask fundamental questions. That's an advantage that we have as a consulting organization. We come in from the outside, and we can go straight to the CEO and say, why are you doing business this way? Which is a great question to ask. Why are we doing it this way? And we won't get fired. That's part of our job. But a designer working inside an organization, I can't imagine an organization where a designer could just go up to the CEO and say, why are we doing it this way? And so I encourage everybody, I want business culture to change such that asking these questions and challenging the status quo is seen as a responsible thing to do to benefit your business. Because if you're just working on the way that, you wish your business was, a lot of people right now are working in businesses that are in transition. The media landscape is changing. The internet has changed everything about the way people conduct business or people conduct their lives. But not, a lot of things, but not everything. And so now is a time where it's very important to go out and kind of keep checking, keep doing that reality check. Like is a very common word. And I think especially in this day where so many of us use Facebook or systems that have copied Facebook, and liking is everywhere. People signify their interaction by liking things. And people, even in a business context, and even clients will talk about liking or not liking a particular design or something. And like is a completely useless word, because liking something has nothing to do with behavior. And liking, if you like a particular design, if you're evaluating maybe different interfaces or different options for your own business, and you say, oh, I like that one, what does that mean? And so you've got to get past that to what problem you're trying to solve. Liking doesn't solve any problem at all. And just because somebody likes something doesn't mean that they'll do anything differently. You might say, you like a particular style of house, but that doesn't mean, I like castles, I'm not going to buy a castle. I don't like something. People do plenty of things that they claim not to like. I watch TV shows that I'll say, you ask me, do you like the newsroom? I hate the newsroom, but I watch the newsroom so that I can talk about it with my friends and talk about how much I hate it. And that would be an example. If you ask somebody, how do you feel about this? I hate it. People, hating things drives more page views on the internet than anything. And so if you think, oh, liking equals success, that equation's a total fallacy. I think research is a misunderstood word, but it's a good word, and it is the word. And I think, clear communication is a key part of all business and all design. And so it's much better to say, let's talk about what research is and what research means, rather than try to make up a new word. Because people, coining new words and coining new methodologies is very popular. And again, that feels fun, because you feel like, oh, I created this thing out in the world. And I'm a lot more interested in looking and seeing what's out in the world and understanding how to make that more effective and useful for people. And that's the position that I advocate for, because it's really easy to latch on to a methodology or a buzzword and have that be the most important thing. It's like, why is lean or agile or failure, why is that what you're most interested in instead of the business you're building? A cargo cult refers to, there was a group of people in the Pacific Islands during the Second World War who were living there when a bunch of Westerners arrived with their boats and all of their stuff. And it was very exciting. And then they left. And so what the people on this island did was build replica boats out of materials at hand, because they thought that's what made the people come. And so this idea is that the idea of cargo cult in design or in businesses is that if you create the surface appearance that copies, say, oh, Google does this, and Google is very successful. So if I just copy this interface, the way that Google looks, then I will have the same success. It's really focusing on the externals. You can see this a lot with Apple. Apple comes out with a new design, and people copy the surface of it. And then they say, why am I not successful like Apple? And that's because they're not. Apple reached that obvious surface conclusion through a lot of work and a lot of understanding what would work for them as a business. And you can never just look at the end product from the outside and say, oh, if I just copy that end product, then I'll have all of the success, which represents this huge system behind it. Thinking about your competitors and doing that competitive analysis is a part of research. And the funny thing is that sometimes that type of research and organizational research aren't considered by what used to be called user-centered designers as part of research. And what I'm really trying to do is to get people to think of all the kinds of research and all the kinds of questions that they need to be asking in order to be successful. If you're using the traditional user-centered methodology, sometimes you might leave out things about competitors or about your business or about your organization and other things that need to happen to make this product a success. There are plenty of applications and services and products that were beloved by users that were not sustainable businesses. And that's because maybe the designers did research and they said, oh, we know this is a very successful design. Users love it and users will use it and they'll tell other people about it. But actually it was a completely money-losing business. And so that is an unsuccessful design. So even if people love it, even if people think it's beautiful, it's not successful unless it's competitive. It's not successful unless it's sustainable. And so asking all of these questions, that's all research. And that's the way I want people to think of it, as just a way of thinking and a way of approaching the world in terms of making sure that you have all the knowledge you need to build a business successfully. And definitely being honest and making sure that you're not interpreting, the answers to the questions you found in a way that conforms to how you think of the world. You should always be striving to be proven wrong. And that's an uncomfortable position, but that's, in terms of running a business, the most useful. It's like, prove me wrong. You want to be proven wrong quickly because that will save you time and save you money.